It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon, the kind where the sun shines lazily through the windshield, the grocery list is short, and the most complicated decision you face is which brand of protein bar to toss in the cart. That's all Dwayne Johnson, 53, had in mind as he strolled through the automatic doors of Easy Save Groceries, dressed down in a plain black tee and worn jeans, the kind of outfit that lets him blend in, almost. Most people didn't even recognize him, not without the lights, the action, the roar of the crowd, and he liked it that way. He wasn't there to be The Rock. He was there to be a regular guy, a neighbor, just a man grabbing some snacks. But fate has a funny way of rewriting the script. As Dwayne rounded the final aisle toward the checkout, a sharp shift in the air caught his attention. The kind of tension you feel before a storm hits, invisible but thick. A few registers over, something wasn't right. There was a woman, mid-30s, clutching a crumpled handful of coupons and a worried expression that cut deeper than any words. He could. Her two young kids stood beside her, one gently tugging at her coat, the other pointing longingly at a package of cookies on the counter. The cashier, a girl barely out of high school, stared down at her with the kind of dismissive, almost rehearsed apathy that you only learn when you've grown used to treating struggle as an inconvenience. "I'm sorry, ma'am. These aren't valid anymore," the cashier said, tapping the coupons against the counter, the sound sharp and deliberate. "We don't accept expired offers," the woman's voice cracked. But the flyer just came in the mail this week. It said these were good through Sunday." "Not my problem," the cashier replied with a shrug that seemed too heavy for her skinny shoulders. "You can pay full price or leave the items here. It's up to you." Dwayne paused. He watched, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because the moment felt wrong in his bones. The woman, Sarah, he'd later learn, was trying to explain, apologize, reason with someone who had already decided she wasn't worth listening to. Behind her, customers were growing restless, sighing, rolling their eyes, muttering under their breath. But Dwayne wasn't looking at them. He was watching her, watching the way she kept shrinking into herself, pulling her kids close, trying not to cry in front of them. And then he saw him, Mr. Porter, the store manager, a short man with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was standing just off to the side, arms crossed, watching it all unfold like it was entertainment, like he'd seen it 100 times and would see it 100 more. Dwayne could tell instantly, this guy thrived on moments like this. No one else saw it, but Dwayne did. He was just here for protein bars. But now, something else was rising in him, a quiet, burning certainty. This wasn't going to be just another grocery run. It was about to become something else entirely. Sarah Morgan wasn't new to hard days. In fact, they had become the norm. Raising 2 kids on her own while juggling not 1 but 2 part-time jobs had made her life a constant balancing act. Every dollar she spent was tracked, every grocery trip planned down to the cent. And today, this grocery trip was one she'd barely managed to afford. The night before, she'd stayed up with a calculator and a pile of crumpled coupons, hoping the discounts would stretch just far enough to cover the essentials. Milk, bread, eggs, maybe a small treat for the kids if there was anything left. Easy. Save Groceries wasn't her first choice. No one's, really. Locals called it shady save behind closed doors, an open secret. Sure, the front windows promised unbeatable deals, but inside the reality was different. Price tags that didn't match the register. Specials that were just relabeled expired goods. Unmarked fees showing up on receipts. But it was close, walkable, and when you don't have a car, when you're trying to get groceries before your evening shift and after-school pickup, proximity matters more than quality. The moment Sarah stepped through the doors, the weight settled on her chest. Mia and Tommy, both under 10, were already asking for things, their small voices overlapping with excitement. "Can we get this?" "Mommy?" Mia asked, holding up a box of colorful cereal. Sarah smiled, soft but strained. Not today, sweetie. Just the basics, remember. She didn't want them to feel the worry she carried, didn't want them to know that this week even the basics felt out of reach. As she made her way through the aisles, her list was her lifeline. Items selected carefully, budgeted down to the penny. She avoided distractions, ignored end-cap displays designed to lure her in. Just stick to the list, just make it to the register. But when she finally did, everything started to unravel. The cashier barely looked at her. When Sarah handed over her stack of coupons, already worn from being folded and refolded, the girl flipped through them with a sigh. "These are expired," she said, tapping one against the counter. "We can't use any of these." Sarah blinked. "But I got them in the mail just a few days ago. The flyer said they were good through—" "I don't make the rules," the cashier cut in, already moving on. "You can either pay the full price or leave some things behind. Up to you." Sarah's heart sank. She felt heat rising in her face, the sting of humiliation right there at the checkout. She opened her wallet, fingers trembling, and began counting out bills quietly, trying to stretch what little she had. Behind her, people groaned. One man muttered, "Come on, lady, some of us have places to be." And somewhere nearby, she felt eyes watching her. Not just those in line, but someone else, someone who seemed to be enjoying the show. That someone was Mr. Porter. The store manager stood near his office, arms crossed, mouth curled into a polite, polished smile. But it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that says, "I know I've got you cornered." He took a few steps forward, slowly, like he was stepping onto a stage. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice smooth and faux sympathetic. Sarah looked up, hesitating. I just thought the coupons were still good," she said softly. Porter didn't even bother checking them. He glanced at the groceries, then at her kids, then back to Sarah. "Maybe next time check before wasting everyone's time," he said. The words were wrapped in sugar but hit like a slap, and then something even worse. Porter leaned down, whispering to the cashier, but loud enough that Dwayne, standing just behind a nearby rack, could hear every word. "Upsell her on the expired snacks," Porter said. "She won't know the difference." Sarah, still counting the dollars she couldn't quite stretch far enough, didn't hear it. But Dwayne did. Every word, every tone, every intention, and, just like that, the quiet tension that had been building inside him began to turn into something else. He didn't know this woman, but he knew that look in her eyes. That quiet, tired desperation, the way she kept apologizing for simply trying to feed her children. Something about this place, something about this moment. It was about to change. And Dwayne Johnson wasn't. Walking away, there was a stillness in his stance, the kind that came right before the storm. His basket, filled with a modest selection of protein bars and bottled water, now felt irrelevant. The moment demanded something more, something real. He watched Sarah struggle to decide what she could afford to put back. A loaf of bread in one hand, a carton of milk in the other, staples, non-negotiables, and yet she was trying to choose between them. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Maybe the eggs." She was breaking down in real time, in front of her kids, in front of strangers who didn't care, and in front of a manager who was openly feeding on her shame. Dwayne stepped forward without a word, placing his basket on the counter beside hers. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. He didn't need to raise his voice. His calm was louder than yelling. "Add her groceries to my bill," he said simply, pulling out his wallet. The cashier blinked, caught off guard. Sir, are you sure? I mean, that's—" "I said, add them," Dwayne repeated, his tone even but firm, like bedrock. He handed over his card, never once breaking eye contact. Then turning to Sarah, he nodded gently. "You don't have to worry about this today. Let me help." Her eyes welled up instantly. "I can't let you do that," she said, shaking her head, overwhelmed. "It's too much." It's not. Too much, Dwayne replied softly. You've already got enough on your plate. The cashier hesitated for a beat, then started scanning the items, still glancing sideways at Porter, who stood frozen nearby, unsure of what to do. But Dwayne wasn't finished. He looked around the store, the bright banners, the perfectly staged shelves, the curated music overhead. Everything was designed to distract. But he noticed the fine print on discount tags, the mismatched price, stickers, the strategically placed clearance bins full of products nearing expiration. This wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. When the transaction was done, the cashier handed Dwayne the receipt. He studied it briefly, then looked at Sarah again. Do you shop here often? He asked. She nodded hesitantly. It's the only place close enough to walk to, she admitted, but sometimes things don't feel right. Prices change. Or they say I bought things I didn't. I don't know. Dwayne's eyes narrowed. He turned toward Mr. Porter, who was now stepping forward, trying to recover his composure with a professional smile that didn't quite land. Is there an issue here? Porter asked, voice slick like oil. Is that so? Dwayne said quietly, ignoring the question. He looked back at Sarah. You've noticed problems before? She nodded again. Yeah, a lot. Porter chuckled nervously. Now there's no need to make accusations. We're just a small business, trying to serve the community. Dwayne's expression didn't change. Serving the community by overcharging them. His tone cut like glass, calm, sharp, undeniable. Nearby customers began to pay attention. Whispers, glances, a current of awareness passed through the store. Porter shifted, his smile fading. Let's keep the line moving, he barked at the cashier, trying to steer the moment back under control. But Dwayne wasn't finished. He stepped in closer, not threatening, just present, too present to ignore. I don't like being lied to, he said, low and steady. And I really don't like watching people like her get taken advantage of. Porter bristled. You don't know anything about how we run things here? Dwayne tilted his head, a slow smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. But it wasn't the friendly kind. Maybe not yet, he said, but something tells me I'm about to find out. Sarah looked between the two men, clutching her bag of groceries, her kids huddled close. Dwayne turned to her and said gently, Why don't you and the kids wait outside? I'll catch up. She hesitated, then nodded, ushering her children toward the exit. She didn't know exactly what was about to happen, but something told her this wasn't just about groceries anymore. Dwayne watched her go, then turned back to Porter. Now it was just the two of them. As Sarah disappeared through the sliding glass doors, her children pressed close to her side, Dwayne's gaze stayed locked on Mr. Porter. The store around them buzzed with the everyday noise of commerce, scanning beeps, muted conversations, carts rattling over linoleum. But in Dwayne's mind it all faded. His focus narrowed like a lens. Porter, the man's smug facade was cracking, not visibly yet, but Dwayne could see the shift, the tiny flicker of panic behind those calculating eyes. Dwayne took a small step closer, his voice barely above, a murmur, but it carried weight. You've been scamming people, haven't you? The question wasn't really a question, it was a dare, a challenge wrapped in calm certainty. Porter scoffed, tried to brush it off with false bravado. You've got no proof, he sneered, so why don't you just mind your own business? Dwayne didn't blink. Oh, don't worry, he said, voice low and dangerous. I'm about to make it my business. Porter's jaw twitched. For the first time, there was a flash of something real, fear, not much, not loud, but there, and Dwayne saw it, filed it away. This wasn't over, not yet. Dwayne didn't say another word. He didn't have to. He grabbed his receipt from the counter, shot Porter one last look that landed like a punch to the gut, and walked out. But he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Later that evening, long after the hum of grocery store lights and fluorescent smiles had faded into silence, Dwayne sat in his car, parked a block away. The glow from his phone lit up his face as he scrolled through review after review of Easy Save. Each one felt like a puzzle piece. Prices never match at the register. Bought milk, it's spoiled overnight. They prey on single moms. Stay away if you can. The stories kept coming. Different voices, same themes, exploitation, neglect. A business built on taking advantage of people who had nowhere else to go. Dwayne's grip on the steering wheel tightened. This wasn't just a bad manager. This was a pattern, a machine. The next morning, driven by a need for truth deeper than simple outrage, Dwayne found himself standing in front of a modest apartment building with paint peeling at the edges. The kind of place where every hallway echoed and the walls held stories. Sarah lived on the 3rd floor. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, grocery bag in hand, her face was a mix of surprise and something softer. Gratitude. Confusion. "Dwayne," she said, her voice light, tentative. "I just wanted to check in," he said, stepping inside. The apartment was small but spotless. Second-hand furniture, a couple of drawings taped to the fridge, toys stacked neatly in a corner. It wasn't much, but it was held together with care, with effort, with love. Sarah set the groceries on the counter. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Dwayne replied, "but I had some questions." She paused, watching him carefully. "About the store?" He nodded. "About what happened and whether it's happened before." Sarah took a breath, sat down slowly at the table. Her eyes lowered. "All the time," she said quietly. "Prices change between the shelf and the register. And when you say something, they act like you're imagining it, or they give you store credit you can't even use." Dwayne leaned in slightly, not pressing, but listening, really listening. "And Porter?" he asked. "Ever do anything off?" Her expression darkened. "He watches people, especially moms. A few weeks ago he told me he had this deal. Said I could get all my groceries and pay later. Sounded helpful at first. But when I read the paper, it wasn't just groceries. It was a loan with crazy interest. Like loan shark crazy." Dwayne sat back, jaw tight. "That's illegal." "I know," Sarah said. "But what choice do we have? He targets people who are desperate. I didn't sign, but some of my neighbors did. Now they're drowning in debt." Dwayne didn't speak right away. He stared down at the table, then looked up, voice steady. "Do you know anyone I can talk to? Someone who's been through it?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah, Mrs. Henderson. She lives in 2B, retired teacher. Porter's got her so stressed she barely opens her door anymore." Dwayne's response was simple, final. "Then that's where I'm going next." The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and laundry detergent, a quiet stillness settling in the air like a warning. Dwayne made his way to apartment 2B, his steps firm but careful. He knocked gently, not wanting to startle anyone. For a long moment there was no answer, just the muffled hum of a television through the wall and the distant creak of pipes. Then the door opened a crack. A single wary eye peeked through. "Mrs. Henderson?" Dwayne asked, his voice calm, warm. The woman behind the door was in her 70s, frail and tired but sharp. "Who's asking?" "My name's Dwayne Johnson. I spoke with Sarah from upstairs. She said you might need someone to listen." Something in the way he said it, honest, steady, made her open the door a little wider. A beat passed, then she sighed and stepped aside. "Come in then." Her apartment was humble. Doilies on worn armrests, a bookshelf stacked with old paperbacks and framed photos of grandkids. The air carried the scent of tea and something floral, faint but familiar. "I don't usually open the door for anyone," she admitted, lowering herself carefully into a chair. "But Sarah trusts you, and I trust Sarah." Dwayne sat across from her. "She told me you signed one of Porter's payment plans?" Mrs. Henderson nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a manila envelope on the coffee table. "He said I could pay off my groceries slowly, said it was a kindness." What he didn't say was, the interest was so high I couldn't even afford my medication. She handed Dwayne a crumpled contract. His eyes scanned the pages quickly, scanning line after line of fine print that was buried in legalese and deceit. Hidden penalties, exorbitant fees, terms designed to trap, not help. I tried to back out, she said, her voice soft but bitter. Told him I'd rather go without food than be tricked. That's when he sent 2 men to my door. Told me if I didn't pay up, they'd start collecting, starting with my furniture. Dwayne's jaw clenched, but his voice remained level. You're not the only one. He's done this to others. And I think it goes way deeper than this. Store. Mrs. Henderson looked at him, eyes rimmed with tears but full of steel. What are you going to do? He folded the contract and tucked it into his jacket. Everything I can. That night, Dwayne sat at his kitchen table, documents spread out before him like a battlefield map. The contract from Mrs. Henderson, receipts, notes, online reviews, whispers of the same scam repeated across town. This wasn't isolated. It was organized. The same deceptive payment plans offered to desperate people in low-income neighborhoods. The same pattern of intimidation when they couldn't keep up. Easy Save wasn't just a sketchy grocery store. It was a pipeline of exploitation dressed up as convenience. By sunrise, Dwayne had connected the dots. He wasn't just up against a shady store manager. He was staring down a system, a business built on bait-and-switch schemes, weaponized debt, and fear. Porter's empire might look like a grocery chain, but it operated like a predator. It preyed on isolation, on exhaustion, on good people trying to survive. And now it had his full attention. Dwayne stood, gathered the evidence into a folder, and looked out the window at a city just waking up. The lights flickered on in quiet apartments. Parents woke their children. Coffee brewed. Life moved forward. But behind too many of those doors were stories like Sarah's, like Mrs. Henderson's. And Dwayne knew if someone didn't stand up to Porter soon, more stories would turn into tragedies. Not on his watch. The following evening, Dwayne returned to Easy Save, not as a customer this time, but as a man on a mission. The sky had darkened into a heavy indigo, and the store's neon signs flickered like weak promises above the glass entrance. Inside, the aisles were half empty, the late-night crowd sparse and tired, some shuffling through their routines, unaware that they were walking through a trap. Dwayne moved with calculated ease, blending in just enough to keep eyes off him. Underneath his jacket, a small button camera recorded everything. He wasn't looking for confrontation, not yet. He was looking for proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof. From behind a shelf stacked with canned goods, he watched the employees carefully. Most were young, just trying to get by. But their behavior mirrored what he'd suspected. Quick to deflect questions, vague when challenged about prices, always checking in with one man. Porter. The manager roamed the floor like a hawk, stepping out of his office at random intervals, scanning the store with the smug confidence of someone who knew he was untouchable. But Dwayne could sense something else, too. Paranoia. Porter's eyes moved a little too quickly. His smile faltered a little too easily. He was expecting trouble. He just didn't know where it would come from. Dwayne's instincts guided him toward the back of the store, where a plain, unmarked door stood half-concealed behind a promotional display. "Employees only," it read in faded black letters. Most customers wouldn't have even noticed it. Dwayne did. He waited until the hallway was clear, then slipped through the door like a shadow. Inside, the lighting was dim and the air thick with the smell of old cardboard and disinfectant. Rows of metal shelves lined the room, stacked high with products. Some crushed, some clearly expired, all out of sight from the shopping floor. This was where the truth hid. In the far corner stood a locked filing cabinet. Dwayne knelt beside it, pulling from his jacket pocket a paperclip he had swiped earlier near the register. With practiced patience, he picked the lock. The drawer slid open with a soft, metallic groan, revealing a treasure trove of rot. Loan agreements, altered receipts, duplicate inventory sheets, and internal memos that spelled out the scam in black and white. It was all there, Porter's blueprint for exploitation. He snapped photos quickly, methodically. This was bigger than he thought. Then, footsteps, heavy, fast. Voices. Dwayne ducked behind a stack of boxes, heart steady, every muscle alert. Through a sliver between cartons, he watched as Porter entered the room, flanked by two men in plain clothes. Enforcers. They weren't here to stock shelves. "I don't care how you do it," Porter snapped, his voice stripped of the fake charm he wore in public. "If Mrs. Henderson doesn't pay by the end of the week, make an example of her." Dwayne's fists clenched at his sides, but he stayed silent, recording every word. "We expand this to the east side next," Porter continued. "New neighborhoods, same model. Desperate people always take the bait." The other men nodded. No questions, just compliance. Dwayne's blood boiled, but his mind stayed razor sharp. They were building something, a full-blown racket disguised as grocery stores. Not just a local scheme, but a system designed to scale. That's what made it dangerous. That's what made it urgent. As the men exited, their laughter trailing behind them like smoke, Dwayne emerged from the shadows. He stood for a long moment in the silence of the storage room, surrounded by the rot of greed and cruelty. He had what he came for. But it wasn't just about gathering proof anymore. It was about shutting it all down. For good. He slipped the files back into the cabinet, closed it quietly, and made his way out through the same unmarked door. But when he stepped into the cool night air, he wasn't just a man who'd seen behind the curtain. He was a fuse, ready to light something that couldn't be stopped. The next move, that would change everything. Dwayne didn't sleep that night. The files he'd collected were now spread across his kitchen table like a crime board. Pages of forged loan agreements, photographs of expired products stacked in the back room, copies of altered price logs, and receipts with hidden surcharges. But what weighed heavier than the evidence itself were the faces behind the paper. The tired, worried eyes of people like Sarah, the trembling voice of Mrs. Henderson, and the countless others who didn't even know they were being scammed. This wasn't about bringing down a shady grocery manager anymore. It was about fighting for the dignity of a whole neighborhood that had been silently drained for far too long. Sarah sat across from him now, wrapped in a warm sweater, her hands around a mug of coffee. She stared at the documents in disbelief, her face a mix of anger, sorrow, and something harder, resolve. "We've got enough to bury him," Dwayne said, pushing the last set of photos toward her. "But if we go at him the wrong way, he'll find a way to slither out. It has to be public. It has to be final." Sarah looked up. "What do you have in mind?" Dwayne leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, voice calm. "We expose him where he thinks he's safest, in his store, in front of everyone." She blinked. "You want to confront him in front of customers." "Exactly," Dwayne replied. "But not alone. We'll do it when the store is full, when the community can hear what he's been doing with their own ears. And I won't be the only one talking. You, Mrs. Henderson, everyone he's taken advantage of. We bring their voices forward too." Sarah hesitated. "They'll be scared." "They already are," Dwayne said gently, "but fear's what he's been counting on. This time, we bring truth and backup." Over the next few days, the plan began to take shape. Sarah reached out to her neighbors, knocking on doors, asking for stories. Many were hesitant, embarrassed, or terrified of retaliation. But when she told them what Dwayne had uncovered, when she showed them the paperwork, the photos, the pattern, they started to speak. One by one, people came forward. A single mother who had been overcharged every month. A delivery driver who was promised a line of credit and ended up losing his truck. A quiet man named Mr. Ruiz, who had lost his savings in one of Porter's predatory payment plans. Dwayne visited him in the small kitchen of his apartment, where Mr. Ruiz recounted how he had trusted Porter's offer to help families. He had signed a contract, thinking he was securing groceries for his kids. Instead, he ended up locked into a loan he couldn't pay back. "They took everything," he said, voice breaking. "I thought it was my fault." Dwayne placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not, and we're going to make it right." Knowing that legal action alone might not be enough, Dwayne called in a favor from Detective Marcus Cole, an old friend with a reputation for digging deep and playing fair. At first, Marcus was skeptical. Grocery store fraud? It sounded small. Until Dwayne laid out the scope, the forged contracts, the intimidation tactics, the systematic targeting of low-income families. "This isn't just fraud," Marcus said after reviewing the evidence. "This is organized crime." Marcus agreed to help, not just by building a case, but by being present at the takedown. He also connected Dwayne with a local investigative journalist named Emma Lan, someone known for her integrity and reach. Emma was quick to jump in, promising full media coverage of the confrontation to ensure the public couldn't look away. The stage was being set. Every piece was falling into place. Porter still thought he was in control, still thought no one had the guts to go after him. But he hadn't met the version of the community that had nothing left to lose, and one man willing to give them their voice back. The plan was precise, calculated, and set to unfold on a Friday evening when Easy Save was at its busiest. The timing wasn't a coincidence. If this was going to work, it had to be public, it had to be loud, and it had to hit Porter exactly where he never expected it, in front of a crowd, under the harsh lights of his own store, with cameras rolling and backup standing by. Sarah played her part flawlessly. She walked into the store alone, pushing an old cart with a wobbling wheel, clutching a small list and the same exhausted expression she wore the day Dwayne first saw her. But this time, her heart pounded for a different reason. Hidden beneath her jacket was a tiny microphone, feeding every word to Dwayne, Detective Cole, and the small news crew waiting just outside. Emma Lan, the journalist, stood by with her, camera team ready to capture everything. Cole and his officers remained nearby, out of sight, but ready to move on Dwayne's signal. As Sarah approached the counter, Porter greeted her with his signature smirk, the one that had fooled so many people into thinking he was generous. "Back so soon," he said with a hint of charm. "Told you we'd take care of you." Sarah nodded, her voice wavering just enough to sound authentic. I need more groceries. I promise I'll pay the rest next week." Porter's smile widened. "No problem at all. Just sign here." He slid a contract across the counter, the same kind he'd used to trap dozens of families. "You'll walk out with everything you need today." That's when it happened. Dwayne stepped forward from the back of the store, his presence stopping everything around him like a thunderclap. His voice rang out, clear, calm, undeniable. "Hold it right there, Porter." Porter's head snapped up. His smile froze. "You again. What do you want?" Without a word, Dwayne pulled out his phone and tapped play. From the tiny speaker came Porter's voice, recorded from their last encounter, offering predatory loan terms complete with interest rates and threats. The store went quiet. Customers paused mid-checkout. Cartwheels stopped, heads turned. One voice echoed across the room, Porter's own, revealing the truth. "This is what I want," Dwayne said coldly. "For everyone here to know exactly what kind of man you really are." Porter's face turned red. "You think you can just walk in here and—" But Dwayne cut him off, voice rising just enough to command the room. "You've been exploiting these people for years, selling expired goods, inflating prices, trapping desperate families in debt. That ends today." At that moment, Detective Cole and his team entered the store, flashing badges and fanning out. Emma's cameras followed, capturing every angle as officers moved toward the back room. The customers, once passive, now erupted with whispers and gasps. Some even clapped. Justice was unfolding in real time. Porter tried to backpedal, stammering about misunderstandings, about paperwork, but it was too late. The truth was out, and he wasn't walking away from this one. As Porter was handcuffed and led through the store, like the predator he was, Sarah stood near Dwayne, her kids wrapped around her legs. She looked up at him, eyes shining with something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Hope, you did it," she whispered. Dwayne shook his head, eyes on the crowd now rallying around them. "No," he said. "We did." In the days that followed, the ripple effect from that Friday night spread like wildfire. What began as a quiet act of defiance inside a local grocery store became a citywide headline. News crews replayed the footage on a loop. Porter's voice exposed, Dwayne's calm confrontation, and the cheers of a crowd finally seeing justice. Social media caught fire, hashtags trended, families shared their own stories. People who had once felt invisible were finally being heard. Easy Save was forced to shut its doors indefinitely, and as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a sprawling network of similar schemes stretching beyond just one location. What had started as a single grocery store was now exposed as a system-wide fraud operation. The charges piled up: predatory lending, consumer fraud, intimidation, racketeering. Porter didn't just lose his job, he lost his empire. The evidence, the testimonies, the recordings, it was airtight. There was no wriggling out of it. His trial was set to become a public reckoning, but the real story wasn't about Porter. It was about the people he tried to break and the community that came together to stop him. With Emma Land's help, Dwayne connected the victims to a local nonprofit that specialized in consumer protection and legal aid. Within weeks, a class action lawsuit was filed and an interim relief fund was established using Porter's frozen assets. Families who had once struggled to keep their lights on suddenly had a path to get back on their feet. They weren't just compensated, they were believed. Sarah became the face of the movement. Her quiet strength and vulnerability struck a chord across the city. She spoke at press conferences, stood beside lawyers, and gave interviews not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted change. And change followed. One afternoon, Dwayne showed up at the daycare center where Sarah had just started working. Thanks to a recommendation he'd made to a friend who ran the facility, she was now in a full-time role, finally doing what she loved, helping children grow. When she saw him standing in the doorway, a quiet smile spread across her face. "I still can't believe it," she said, walking over. "I wake up every day and I don't feel scared anymore." Dwayne nodded. "That's how you know it's real." Her eyes softened. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You didn't just do it," Dwayne replied. "You showed everyone how." The transformation in the community was unmistakable. Neighbors who barely spoke before now organized food drives, childcare swaps, and community meetings. In the empty lot where Easy Save once stood, a weekly farmers market took root, offering affordable, healthy food sourced from local vendors. What had been a place of exploitation became a symbol of resilience. Dwayne didn't stick around for the cameras or the celebrations. That wasn't his style. He walked the market on opening day, nodded to familiar faces, and then quietly disappeared. Down the sidewalk, no big speech, no farewell, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing something had changed, because for him, it was never about being the hero. It was about making sure the people who needed one never had to feel alone again.